afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, rockers and hip-hoppers, juggalos and juggalettes. Welcome to another edition of Stitches and Glitches. I am your host, the often over-caffeinated, sleep-deprivated artist known as Seethe. And today we are here to talk about Colossal-Armageddon, featuring moi. And the rest of the Try EP, featuring our good man, Ralph Gleason. So anywho, for those of you that don't know about Colossal is a one-man band project featuring the one, the only, Cy owner of Unsigned Showcase. Cy and I, we met in 2020 online. He had just started up his podcast, The Unsigned Showcase. We began working together. He was doing some pretty cool and awesome stuff, promoting 9-Stitch Method and Seethe, and then we were working together for Brutal Business and whatnot. Had a lot of cool interactions, and it's been a great working relationship, and Cy's just an extremely great individual that, you know, I can call a friend, and I've gotten to know and work with over the years. So what's really cool about Cy is he comes from the school of, like, the OG grindcore, chaotic hardcore, Converge, Zayo, all of them, like, early 2000s, 90s type stuff back in the day, which is, outside of nu metal, like, that's my bread and butter as well. Whenever him and I first started talking shop about music and compositions and whatnot, he is a fantastic producer for that style. Just very raw, gritty, visceral, dirty, and the dude is just a madman when it comes to riffs. Something that's really cool that you have to understand is when Cy feels inspired, he hits record and he just goes and riffs and riffs and riffs, and then cuts, goes back through, layers it again, cuts, goes back through, and just builds and builds off of these takes. And then he goes back and, you know, puts the drums and everything in. And he's worked with a lot of different singers over the years. Cy being a vocalist himself, he recently started doing his own vocals on his tracks. But I know one of the earlier Colossal EPs, he worked with, can't remember his name right now, the singer from Fawn Limbs. Pretty big name right now in that, you know, like I say, chaotic, hardcore, mathcore scene. But anywho, Cy had told me, he told me for a while, like, I have a song in mind, you know, like, I can only hear you. Like, you're going to be on this track. And I was like, all right, that's cool, man. Because Cy and I had kind of talked about doing some stuff. He'd sent me some tracks, and just, while I am a heavier vocalist, it's just not my jive. It's just not my thing I do, and I just didn't fit. Whenever he handed me what would become Armageddon, as soon as I heard the music, I was like, oh my god, dude, this is fantastic. The music, it's heavy, it's melodic, it's ambient, it's apocalyptic, which is very fitting for the name. And it was one of them tracks, like I said before in previous episodes, I pride myself in having a rather quick turnaround time, and this was not the case. I think this track took almost, oh bloody hell, I think it almost took a year. It's post-metal. It's not, like, I listen to a lot of stuff like Neurosis and Mare and, what's another, Isis, you know, but, like, it's never been my thing. Like, I've been like, I'm going to do that kind of music. It was a very interesting, turn for me to try and adapt to that type of style, because there's no conventional structure. And it's just, post-metal is one of them things. It's slow, it's, you know, really quiet, it can be really loud, but a lot of times it just kind of rides on the ebb and flow of whatever atmosphere is created, and it just kind of keeps going and going and going. And whenever he gave me that track, I had started, you know, writing to it, but it was a matter of, how am I going to keep this going? How am I going to build this up, you know, to create the story and whatnot, that he wants me to do for this track. And I would start writing, and I'd start recording, and I'd get discouraged, and then I'd be like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Like, I'm sorry I'm taking so long. And he'd be like, you're fine, dude. Just do your thing. just do your thing. Whenever it comes, it comes. So it took me a period of like 6, 7, 8 months to finally write and record it. And throughout that, I think I had half of it done, and my computer had crashed. I lost all the files. I had the demos and everything, but I had to go back and re-record it. There wasn't a lot of layers in that track. There's when you listen to Armageddon, like when you hear different tones, like that's that's pretty much all I did with it. But going back and having to re-record it, I'm glad I did. The takes come out better, but a lot of them, I sat here and I was just like, and I wanted to pass out. But it turned out phenomenal. It turned out great. The hardest part of that track, honestly, was the beginning. Because for the first, 45 seconds, it's this, weird, dissonant, chunky, almost Meshuggah, breakdown type thing. And then it shifts into the apocalyptic, ethereal, celestial type vibe that he just carries on the rest of the track. And overall, it was very fun. I was really proud of the lyrical content and the lyrics that we did with that. And it was kind of funny. This is something that I argue with a lot of producers on that I work with, and they eventually just cave to my will. They're like, give me the stems. I'm like, no, I got shitty equipment. I know how to make my vocals sound good. I know how I like my voice to sound. I'm just going to mix them and send them over to you. And he did something that, I use vocal distortion, for effect and whatnot. I don't use it a lot. It's mainly just to kind of give a certain tone or vibe for something. But he, put distortion on all of my vocals and cranked it up. And at first, when I got the master back, I liked it, but it was weird because I'm like, I don't know. But over time, I've kind of gotten used to it and whatnot. But the track in general, like I said, he's got a different approach to that kind of music and style. Looking back on it, like he says in the footage that I'm about to drop in here, I think we could go back and tweak it, but at the same time, I don't know if I would want to, just because of the way it come out. It's not supposed to be pretty and clean, and it's like I said, it's just very visceral. It's very unnerving, but it's extremely beautiful and calming at the same time. So I look forward again to possibly working with Seethe in the future if it ever comes. Like I said, the dude's a brilliant composer. You can find all of his music from Micro Colossal online at Bandcamp, and it is free. Free! Everybody likes free stuff. So I can't stress that enough. So be sure to check out Micro Colossal on Bandcamp. Check out all of his material. Be sure to check out the rest of the EP as well. Myself, I featured on track 2 of the Try EP on the song Armageddon, and Ralph Gleason featured on the other 2 tracks. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but Ralph himself is a fantastic vocalist and instrumentalist and whatnot as well. Just the whole Try EP, that's honestly not just because I was a part of it. The Try EP is one of my favorite pieces of music that Micro Colossal has put out as a whole. It takes you on this journey. It's very post-metal. It's almost kind of even Deftones-y in some places. Not vocally, more musically. But like I said, it's kind of what Deftones would sort of do later in their career, diving into that shoegaze, doom sort of post-metal type territory, you know what I mean? But yeah, definitely check out Micro Colossal. Be sure to subscribe to Unsigned Showcase as well. I can't stress that enough. Like I said, Seethe has been hustling his channel for 2 years. He's done some amazing things. He works hard and busts ass for the artists that he promotes on that channel. And I'll be real with you too. If you need a reaction video and you want good quality content, Seethe is the man to hit up. He's not like a lot of these reaction channels that are like, oh, yeah, the track was, yeah, it was cool. As he's going through, he talks about the song, the composition, the performances, and he breaks down stuff like, the production and whatnot, what probably went into it, going off of, his ear and stuff. Great guy, great dude to work with. Can't stress that enough. So be sure to like Micro Colossal, and Unsigned showcase. Links will be in the description. So I'm going to quit yammering, and what we're going to do is Seethe was nice enough to go ahead and make a little video himself talking about working on the Try EP and the song Armageddon with me. And then once we're done with that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to listen to Armageddon and, you know, rock out to that. So thank you guys very much. Be sure to subscribe. You can find me on pretty much all platforms. I'm on Spotify, iTunes, Deezer, Tidal, Instagram, Facebook, the whole shebang. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up. We'll be back next week for another episode of Stitches and Glitches. Thank you very much, Seethe, for having me on this project and helping me out with this episode. And yeah, let's listen and see what Seethe had to say about Colossal-Armageddon.
Hey folks, hope you're doing good today. My name's Ian. I'm also known as Colossal, and I also run the Unsigned Showcase channel where I check out underground bands every single day of the week. And that's how I ended up getting to find out about Patrick and all these different various incarnations of Seethe, and Nine Stitch Method and the rest of it. And that's how I ended up finding out about his stuff and eventually working with him as well. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, I've watched a couple of his episodes of Stitches and Glitches, and the kind of vibe seems to be just talking about how the music came about, and, you know, the reasons behind the music and things like that. Well, I can do that all day long, no problem. So we'll talk about that today. Now, Patrick featured on the Try EP, which is 3 tracks, and that's really why I called it Try. And because it was 3 people working together, we worked with another guy as well, Ralph. So it was 3 people, 3 tracks, and I ended up just calling it Try as a result of that. But Patrick featured on one of those tracks, and I knew the second that I wrote that track that I wanted Patrick to feature on it as well, because Patrick has got a certain specific style of vocal and the way that he works with the music as well. And I knew when I wrote the track that he would be able to weave in and do his thing within this music very easily, and it would work out and sound how I wanted it to sound. And when I sent it over to him, he was like, yeah, I can do that, no problem. But when he sent it back, I said it to him straight away, this is exactly how I thought it was going to turn out and how I wanted it to turn out and how I knew he was going to get the job done. Because the thing with Patrick is, he has got a specific style of vocal, and I will say, I've said it before on my show, that it will only work for certain types of music. Now, there's various different types of music that it does work for, but I don't think it's necessarily like a deathcore vocal. It's not really a hardcore vocal and things like that. It's got that nu metal twang to it, and the way that he works with the riffs and builds with the stuff. He's not just shouting out over the top of it. He tries to weave in with the music, you know. So I knew when I wrote the track, or I've written other tracks that I knew would be no good for him whatsoever, and I wouldn't even ask him to sing on those. But the second I wrote this one track, I knew that he would be good on it, and I sent it over to him, and I didn't have anyone else in mind that I was going to work with. Now, the reason I was working with different vocalists on this album is because I wrote this music, it's got more of a post-metal vibe to it, and as a one-man band, I really just write whatever I feel at the time, and at this time, in kind of 2020, I was feeling more post-metal-y. I ended up writing these 3 tracks for this album, but I didn't have anyone to sing over it. And I knew that my style of vocal and the way that I do my vocals as a one-man band wasn't going to work for this music either. I was looking for something very specific with it. And that's how I knew that these 2 guys were going to get the job done for me. And I asked them to work with me. Now, since then, I have been doing mostly my own vocals because I've been writing music that suits my kind of vocal with it. But at this time, this music wasn't going to work with my vocals, so I needed to look for other people. But as I say, as soon as I wrote this track, I was like, yeah, Patrick's going to work on this one, and I was pretty sure he was going to do it as well. I'll just quickly get it up on the screen so that we can check it out, and maybe listen to it in the background as well. Pretty much when I wrote this track, what I was trying to do is write some of the heaviest music I've written, and one of the ways that I wanted to achieve that was by using orange amps. So what I've done with the guitar tones on this track, and this is really how this track came about, is because I started a new effects chain using orange amp simulators, and I just really wanted to get this thick, heavy, dirty orange tone. And as soon, you'll find if you're a guitarist that once you've dialed in a new tone, it makes you start playing certain types of riffs. You know, if you've dialed in a thrashy tone, you're going to start thrashing around the neck. When I started dialing in this dirty, heavy orange tone, it was just heavy with the music, and that's when I was starting to feel this post-metal vibe. So it worked out nicely for this one, and I think it's got a really heavy sound within the guitars. It sounds how I want it to, and I was really pleased with the way that the guitar tone did end up. The only thing with this guitar tone, it only works with certain types of riffs. It's so distorted and just like cranked up to the max that you can't play any notes and things like that with it. It's just heavy, chunky, fat chords with it. But that's what the style I was going for on this one anyway, so it worked out nicely. Now, as I say, I wrote all of this music a year before it actually kind of got the vocals to it and ended up being released. And I feel that that was actually a mistake now in retrospect, because the way that I mixed the music, I mixed it without the vocals, and everything was kind of loud and high in the mix. And then when I got the vocals to add to it, rather than starting from scratch again and starting the whole mix from scratch and trying to build it back up with the vocal kind of ingrained from the start, which would have been the best way to do it and the way I should have done it in retrospect, I just kind of tried to push the rest of the music aside and down a little bit and then kind of elbow in the vocal to it. And I did that with all three of the tracks as well, and I really should have kind of gone back to scratch and started the mix again, I feel, because after listening to it, I listened to the whole album again knowing I was going to do this talk today just to get a refresher, but I have been listening to it over the last year as well, every now and again. For me personally, I feel I did the mix too loud and everything too high in the mix. It's not dynamic enough, doesn't have as many ups and downs as I'd like it to have, and I feel that was because I had all the music pre-mixed before the vocals, and then rather than starting from scratch again and doing the whole mix again, I just elbowed in the vocal and kind of squeezed it in, and because of that all the music's really high and loud, and then the vocals sat in there just as loud as it as well. And in retrospect, I feel what I should have done is kind of dampen the music down a little bit more, had the vocals sitting a bit more on top of it, and just, you know, just doing a few more tweaks to the mix to get things more balanced. Because what I feel what happens across the whole of the EP on this one is that the music's just 10 out of 10 loud. It's like a solid block of sound the whole time, and it loses the dynamics that the music had before I added the vocals to it. So that's a tip for me and anyone else if you're listening to this going forward, as a bit of a kind of talking about your music. If you're someone that writes the music and works with someone else for the vocals, if you've had the music sat around for ages and it's all pre-mixed as an instrumental piece, probably deconstruct it and start again if you get then the vocal to add to it as well, because just trying to shoehorn the vocal into an already basically pre-mixed instrumental, I don't feel is the way to go, because you just need to build it all together, you know, and then it's more cohesive, I feel. So that was one thing I learned from this track, from this album, sorry, but it was only something I learned after doing it all. I didn't realise it at the time, and it's only once you kind of listen to it with fresh ears after the fact that you can really start to get an objective opinion on it, and you kind of, you know, seeing the wood for the trees a bit more then. So there you go, that's something I learned from this track. I really liked working with Patrick. He did exactly what I expected him to do on this track, and no complaints from me in terms of his stuff. And I really like the music as well. I think all the elements are there to make a really great album with this one. I just kind of messed it up by not restarting the whole mix from scratch again, and doing it all again. But there you go, that's things that you live and learn with. But I still enjoy the album. I think it's got a good vibe to it. It's got a big, thick, heavy sound as a result of it being so loud and in your face. So if you are looking for something really thick and like wall of soundy, this does a nice job of that, but it's just kind of lacking those softer dynamics in there. I always feel a wall of sound hits you harder when it's coming from something a bit softer, instead of it just being a wall of sound the whole time. And then you kind of, you know, you need you need the light with the dark, if you know what I'm saying with that one. If it's always dark or if it's always light, you never get the contrast there. And it's usually the contrast of going from one section to the next that you really get the hit. So that's one thing I learned from this, and I'll be using that going forward. If I ever work with people again and using vocalists again, I'll either try to get them to do the vocals at a similar time that I'm writing the music, like show them a demo track of what I'm doing, and then before I go ahead and really start to mix the music, get them to be working on the vocals so that can be input around the same time where it's all still fresh. But yeah, I wouldn't do it again now where I write a bunch of stuff, let it sit for a year, and then start looking for vocalists to work on it. That hasn't worked out for me in the best way, so that's one thing with that. So I hope you've enjoyed me rambling on about that. I didn't know what I was going to say at the start of the video, and I just ended up rambling. That's how I do it, that's my style. So we've got 9-10 minutes out of it. But there you go, that's my thoughts on this track. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll be interested to see what Patrick's got to say about it from his side as well. Very, very cool. Hope you've enjoyed that, guys. We'll see you around. Cheers, bye.